Take a slow, deep breath right now. Breathe in through your nose, hold it for just a moment, and let it go through your mouth. That simple act, that one small breath, is the beginning of everything we are going to talk about today. Because recharging yourself does not require a vacation, a spa day, or an entire weekend of sleep. It begins with the smallest, most intentional act of turning inward. We live in a world that glorifies being busy. We celebrate people who work the most hours, who sleep the least, who push through exhaustion like it is some kind of badge of honor. And somewhere along the way, we started believing that rest was laziness, that slowing down was weakness, that if we were tired, we just needed to push a little harder, drink another cup of coffee, and keep going. But here's the truth that no productivity guru will put on a motivational poster. Exhaustion is not a sign that you are working hard enough. Exhaustion is a signal from your body and your mind that something essential has been neglected. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. And the question is not how do you push through it? The question is, how do you actually listen to it? So today, we are going to explore exactly that. We are going to talk about why we get exhausted in the first place. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. We are going to look at what genuine recharging actually looks like, because it is not always what we think it is. And then I am going to walk you through practical, real-world strategies that you can begin using today, whether you have 23 minutes or just 5. Before we can talk about solutions, we need to understand the problem, and not in a surface-level way, because there is a very important distinction between the different kinds of tiredness that human beings experience, and most people treat them all the same way. They lie down, scroll through their phone, stare at the ceiling, and wonder why they still feel drained when they wake up. Physical exhaustion is the kind most people recognize. Your muscles ache, your eyes are heavy, your body feels like it is moving through thick air. This type of tiredness responds beautifully to sleep, to rest, to stillness. When your body has been working hard, whether through physical labor, illness, or even a long day on your feet, it needs recovery time, and sleep is the master healer for this kind of depletion. But then there is mental exhaustion, and this is the one that most of us are suffering from, often without fully recognizing it. Mental exhaustion comes from sustained cognitive effort, from making too many decisions, from constant multitasking, from information overload, from the never-ending stream of notifications, emails, news, and demands on your attention. Your brain is an organ that uses a tremendous amount of energy. In fact, despite making up only about 2% of your body weight, your brain consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy. When you are mentally exhausted, sleep alone is often not enough to restore it, because sleep addresses physical restoration, but mental restoration requires something more specific. And then there is emotional exhaustion, arguably the heaviest of the three. Emotional exhaustion comes from carrying too much feeling for too long without adequate support, expression, or release. It comes from grief that has not been allowed to breathe, from relationships that take more than they give, from constantly managing other people's emotions while suppressing your own, from navigating conflict, uncertainty, or a deep sense of disconnection from your own purpose. Emotionally exhausted people often look fine on the outside. They function, they show up, but inside they feel hollow, numb, or like they are running on fumes with nothing left to give. Understanding which kind of exhaustion you are experiencing is not just an intellectual exercise. It is the foundation of knowing how to actually help yourself, because the remedy for physical exhaustion is very different from the remedy for emotional exhaustion. Sleeping 12 hours will not heal a broken heart, and taking a vacation will not resolve a nervous system that has been in chronic overdrive for years. Here is something that might surprise you. Many of the things we call rest are not actually restful at all. Scrolling through social media for 2 hours does not rest your mind, it stimulates it. Watching 3 episodes of a thriller series before bed does not calm your nervous system, it activates it. Sitting on the couch while mentally replaying everything you need to do tomorrow does not recharge your body. It keeps your stress hormones elevated while your body remains motionless. True rest is active in a very specific way. It is not passive collapse. It is intentional restoration. There is a difference between doing nothing and genuinely recovering. Doing nothing in a distracted, unconscious, or anxious way is not rest. Genuine rest is the intentional removal of demand, the conscious choice to stop asking something of yourself and to allow your mind, body, and nervous system to return to a state of equilibrium. Research in neuroscience has shown us something remarkable about the human brain. It has what is called a default mode network. This network becomes most active not when you are focused on a task, but when you allow your mind to wander freely without external demands. When you daydream, when you sit quietly, when you take a slow walk without a destination or a podcast in your ears. This network lights up, and it is associated with some of the most important cognitive functions we have: creativity, self-reflection, emotional processing, the formation of memories, and the integration of experiences into meaning. In other words, your brain does its deepest, most restorative work not when you are consuming information, not when you are being entertained, and not when you are being productive. It does its best work when you give it space, when you allow it to be quietly, peacefully unoccupied. This is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, and it is one of the most undervalued, most resisted practices in modern life. To truly understand how to recharge, we need to briefly understand the nervous system, because everything about how tired we feel and how well we recover is rooted there. Your autonomic nervous system has two primary branches. The first is the sympathetic nervous system. This is your fight or flight response. It activates when you perceive stress or danger, real or imagined. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your digestion slows, and your body prepares to respond to a threat. The second branch is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest and digest response. When this branch is dominant, your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, your digestion resumes, your muscles relax, and your body begins to repair and restore itself. This is the physiological state of genuine recovery. The problem is that in modern life, most of us spend the vast majority of our time in a low-grade sympathetic activation, a chronic, low-level stress state. We are not being chased by lions, but our nervous systems do not distinguish between a physical threat and a looming deadline, a difficult conversation, or the anxiety of looking at your inbox. The body responds to psychological stress with the same physiological cascade as a physical emergency. And when you are in a chronic state of low-grade stress activation, your body cannot fully recover, even when you are technically resting. You might sleep for 8 hours and still feel exhausted in the morning because your nervous system spent the night processing the residual stress hormones from the day before. You might sit still for an hour but feel more wound up by the end of it because your mind was racing the entire time. This is why intentionally activating the parasympathetic nervous system is not a luxury. It is a biological necessity, and the beautiful thing is that you have tools to do exactly this, and many of them are free, accessible, and remarkably effective. Let us start with the most powerful and most immediate tool in your recharging toolkit, your breath. Breathing is the only function of the autonomic nervous system that is both automatic and under voluntary control. Your heart beats without you thinking about it. Your digestion happens without your conscious direction, but your breath, while it happens automatically, can be consciously controlled. And because of this, it serves as a direct bridge between your conscious mind and your nervous system. When you slow your breathing down and extend your exhale, you directly activate the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, which runs from your brainstem all the way down to your digestive organs. The vagus nerve is the primary vehicle of the parasympathetic nervous system. When you stimulate it through slow, deep breathing, you are literally sending a signal to your entire body that it is safe to relax. One of the most well-researched breathing techniques for this purpose is extended exhale breathing. The principle is simple. When the exhale is longer than the inhale, the parasympathetic nervous system becomes dominant. Try this right now. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth or nose for a count of 6 to 8. Just a few cycles of this kind of breathing can measurably shift your physiological state within minutes. Another widely used technique is called box breathing. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out, hold for 4. This technique is used by military personnel, surgeons, and athletes to quickly regulate their nervous system under extreme pressure. And it works not just under extreme conditions. It works at your desk, in your car, in a bathroom during a difficult workday, in the middle of a sleepless night. The reason these practices are so important is not just in the moment of doing them. When you practice slow, conscious breathing regularly, over time you actually shift your baseline nervous system tone. You become someone whose body more easily returns to equilibrium after stress. The threshold at which you get overwhelmed rises. Your recovery time after difficult experiences shortens. You build what might be called physiological resilience, and all of it begins with breath. We cannot talk about recharging the body without giving sleep the full weight of attention it deserves. Sleep is not a passive activity. During sleep, your brain undergoes extraordinary maintenance processes. Toxins that accumulate during waking hours, including proteins associated with cognitive decline, are cleared from your brain tissue through a system called the glymphatic system, which is primarily active during deep sleep. Your immune system strengthens, hormones are regulated, emotional memories are processed and integrated, skills and learning are consolidated. The body performs cellular repair at a scale that is simply not possible during waking hours. And yet sleep is the first thing most people sacrifice when life gets demanding. We treat it as flexible, as optional, as a sign of weakness if we need too much of it. The science is unambiguous. Most adults require between 7 and 9 hours of sleep for full cognitive and physical functioning. Below this threshold, performance declines significantly. And what makes sleep deprivation particularly insidious is that people who are chronically underslept are often the last to recognize how impaired they actually are. The tiredness becomes their baseline. They forget what it feels like to be fully rested. Quality of sleep matters as much as quantity. your sleep architecture, the cycling through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, is profoundly affected by what you do in the hours before bed. Exposure to bright light, especially the blue spectrum light from screens, suppresses melatonin production and delays your body's readiness for sleep. Stimulants like caffeine have a half-life of approximately 5 to 7 hours, meaning if you drink coffee at 3 in the afternoon, half of that caffeine is still circulating in your bloodstream at 9 in the evening. Eating a large meal close to bedtime, intense exercise within 2 hours of sleep, and elevated stress hormones from late-night work or difficult conversations all disrupt the natural onset of deep, restorative sleep. Creating conditions for deep sleep is not complicated, but it does require intention. Keeping a consistent sleep and wake time, even on weekends, anchors your circadian rhythm and makes it significantly easier to fall asleep and wake naturally. Keeping your sleeping environment cool, dark, and quiet mimics the environmental conditions under which human sleep evolved. A brief wind-down routine in the 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, something gentle and non-stimulating, like light stretching, reading a physical book, or a warm bath, signals to your nervous system that the demands of the day are over and rest is now the priority. There is a profound paradox at the heart of physical restoration. Sometimes the very thing that feels most restorative, lying still and doing nothing, is not actually what restores us. For certain kinds of exhaustion, particularly mental and emotional exhaustion, movement is one of the most powerful medicines available. When you exercise, your body releases a cascade of neurochemicals, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor that have profound effects on mood, energy, cognitive clarity, and emotional resilience. Regular physical movement quite literally restructures the brain over time, building new neural connections, supporting the health of the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reasoning, planning, and emotional regulation, and reducing the activity of the amygdala, which drives fear and anxiety responses. But we need to be nuanced here, because the kind of movement matters enormously depending on the type of exhaustion you are carrying. If you are acutely physically depleted, if your muscles are sore, your body has been through illness or intense physical demand, then vigorous exercise is not what you need. Gentle movement, slow walking, light stretching, yoga, or swimming at a leisurely pace will serve you far better, facilitating circulation and recovery without adding further demand to a depleted system. But if your exhaustion is primarily mental or emotional, moderate to vigorous exercise can be profoundly clearing. There is something remarkable about what happens to the mind when the body is engaged in rhythmic, sustained physical effort. The mental noise, the ruminating thoughts, the circular worries, the endless inner commentary tends to quiet. The body pulls attention into the present moment. The sensation of breathing hard, of muscles working, of sweat and movement and exertion draws awareness into the physical experience and away from the psychological chatter that drives so much of our mental fatigue. Walking in nature deserves particular mention here, because the research supporting its restorative effects is remarkable. Studies comparing walks in urban environments versus natural environments have consistently found that time in nature, among trees, near water, in open green spaces, reduces cortisol levels, lowers blood pressure, decreases activity in the part of the brain associated with rumination, and improves mood, focus, and creative thinking. This phenomenon has been studied extensively in Japan under the concept of forest bathing, the simple practice of walking slowly through a natural environment while engaging all 5 senses, not as exercise, not with a destination or a pace target, simply as a practice of presence and immersion in the natural world. When it comes to mental recharging, the single most important principle is this: you cannot restore a depleted cognitive system with more cognitive input. The mind does not recover from overstimulation by adding more stimulation. It recovers through reduction, through the deliberate withdrawal of demands on your attention. This is perhaps the most countercultural thing I will say today. In a world that is addicted to stimulation, to constant content, constant connectivity, constant noise, the practice of giving your mind genuine quiet is genuinely radical. And I want to be clear, quiet does not mean silence, necessarily. It means a reduction in cognitive demand. It means doing things that require very little of your thinking mind. Meditation and mindfulness practices are perhaps the most well-researched tools for mental restoration. The practice of sitting quietly, observing your breath, and gently returning your attention to the present moment whenever the mind wanders. This is not complicated, but it is profoundly effective. Studies using brain imaging have shown that even 8 weeks of regular mindfulness practice produces measurable changes in brain structure, increased gray matter density in regions associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation, and decreased density in the amygdala. But I want to acknowledge something important here, because I think it is a barrier for many people. You do not have to meditate in the traditional sense to experience mental restoration. The principle behind meditation, present moment awareness without judgment, can be applied to almost any activity. You can wash dishes mindfully, feeling the warmth of the water, the texture of the soap, the weight of each object in your hands. You can eat a meal with your full attention, actually tasting your food, noticing its texture and temperature without a screen in front of you. You can take a walk and simply notice what you see, hear, smell, and feel, without narrating it mentally or planning anything. This quality of presence, of giving your full, undivided, non-judgmental attention to a single simple thing, is the core mechanism of mental restoration. It interrupts the mental loops. It stops the constant forward projection and backward rumination that consumes so much cognitive energy. It brings you into contact with the actual present moment, which is almost always far more peaceful than the stories your mind is telling about the past or the future. Another powerful tool for mental recharging is what I call deliberate transition rituals, small, intentional practices that mark the boundary between different parts of your day. The human mind naturally divides time into chapters, and when those chapters blur together without clear transitions, cognitive residue from one context bleeds into the next. When you bring work stress into your family dinner, when you bring dinner table concerns into your sleep, when you bring sleep anxiety into your morning, you are carrying unnecessary cognitive load from one context to the next. A transition ritual does not need to be elaborate. It can be as simple as sitting quietly for 3 minutes at the end of your workday and mentally noting, what did I accomplish today? What remains for tomorrow? And now I am choosing to leave work where it belongs. It can be a short walk between your work and home that serves as a physical and psychological decompression. It can be changing your clothes when you arrive home, a symbolic act of releasing one role and stepping into another. These small rituals accumulate significant value over time by preserving cognitive boundaries and preventing the exhaustion that comes from carrying everything everywhere. Emotional exhaustion is perhaps the most overlooked and least understood form of depletion, and it requires a different kind of response than physical or mental exhaustion. The heart does not heal through optimization strategies. It heals through connection, expression, and meaning. Connection is perhaps the most fundamental of these. Human beings are profoundly social creatures. We evolved in tight-knit groups where belonging was not merely a comfort, it was a survival necessity. The neuroscience of loneliness is sobering. Social isolation activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Feeling disconnected, unseen, or unvalued is genuinely painful at a biological level, and it is extraordinarily exhausting to carry. Genuine connection, the kind where you feel truly seen and heard, where you can be fully yourself without performance or pretense, is one of the most powerful restoratives available to the human spirit. This does not have to mean deep, intense conversations every time. Sometimes it is the warmth of shared laughter with someone who knows you well. Sometimes it is sitting quietly in the presence of someone whose company is comforting without requiring anything. Sometimes it is the simple, profound act of someone asking how you really are and waiting patiently to hear the true answer. Expression is equally important. When emotions are not expressed, they do not disappear. They are stored. In the body as tension, in the mind as rumination, in the heart as a kind of heaviness that accumulates over time. Writing is one of the most accessible and scientifically validated tools for emotional processing. Research on expressive writing has consistently found that writing about difficult experiences and emotions, not editing them, not making them presentable, but simply allowing them to flow onto the page, reduces stress hormones, improves immune function, and measurably improves psychological well-being. You do not need to be a writer. You do not need to craft sentences beautifully. The practice of simply sitting with a notebook and writing what is true for you right now, what you feel, what you are carrying, what you are afraid of, what you grieve, what you long for, creates space between yourself and your experience. It externalizes what has been internal. It gives form and containability to feelings that otherwise flood through you without resolution. And then there is meaning. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to develop his profound work on meaning-centered therapy, observed something extraordinary in the most extreme circumstances of human suffering. People who had a sense of meaning and purpose could endure almost anything, and those who lost their sense of purpose, regardless of their physical circumstances, deteriorated rapidly. This insight translates directly to everyday exhaustion. Much of the emotional depletion we experience comes not from working too hard or doing too much, but from doing things that feel disconnected from what matters to us. When your days are filled primarily with obligations, expectations, and performance, and very little with what genuinely moves, excites, or nourishes you, the soul grows tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. Reconnecting with meaning does not always require dramatic change. Sometimes it means carving out even 30 minutes for something that is entirely yours. A creative pursuit, a practice, a time of quiet reflection where you revisit what you care about and why. Sometimes it means having a conversation with yourself or a trusted person about whether the life you are living is in alignment with the values you hold. Even small realignments can produce remarkable shifts in energy and vitality. We cannot leave the body out of this conversation. The experience of exhaustion is profoundly shaped by what we put into our bodies. And yet, this is an area where many people are unknowingly depleting themselves every day. The cellular machinery that produces energy, the mitochondria, requires specific raw materials to function. When those materials are absent or insufficient, energy production falters at the most fundamental level. Hydration is perhaps the most underrated factor in energy and cognitive function. Even mild dehydration, a reduction of just 1 to 2% in body water, has measurable effects on concentration, mood, and perceived effort. Many people walk through their days in a state of mild chronic dehydration and attribute the resulting fatigue, headaches, and mental fog to other causes. The simple practice of drinking sufficient water throughout the day before you feel thirsty, which is already a delayed indicator of dehydration, can produce noticeable improvements in energy within hours. Blood sugar stability is another major factor in sustained energy. The sharp rises and crashes associated with high sugar, highly processed foods create predictable cycles of energy and fatigue throughout the day. A meal or snack that is high in simple carbohydrates delivers a rapid influx of glucose followed by a rapid drop, and that drop is experienced as fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and an urgent craving for more quick energy. Over time, these cycles contribute significantly to a sense of chronic depletion. Protein, healthy fats, and fiber-rich complex carbohydrates eaten at regular intervals throughout the day support stable blood sugar, sustained energy, and the steady production of neurotransmitters, the brain chemicals that regulate mood, motivation, focus, and sleep. This does not require a complex dietary overhaul. It simply means making small, consistent choices that prioritize real, whole foods over quick, processed ones, and paying attention to how different foods make you feel in the hours after you eat them. There is one more dimension of recharging that is absolutely essential, and it is perhaps the most personally challenging for many people. All of the strategies we have discussed, the breathing, the sleep, the movement, the mindfulness, the connection, the expression, require one thing that is often in desperately short supply: time, space. The permission to not be available, not be productive, not be performing, not be meeting everyone else's needs at the expense of your own. Learning to say no, and saying it clearly, kindly, and without excessive justification, is a profound act of self-stewardship. It is a declaration that your energy, your attention, and your time are finite resources that deserve to be tended with care. Every yes to something that depletes you is an implicit no to something that restores you. And the accumulation of these small choices over months and years is what either builds or dismantles your capacity for a vibrant, energized life. Many people struggle deeply with this because saying no can feel selfish, unkind, or disappointing to others. And I want to offer you a reframe. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. The most generous, loving, effective, and present version of you is not the version that sacrifices everything. It is the version that tends to itself with enough care to have something real to offer. Rest is not self-indulgence. It is maintenance. It is the prerequisite for sustained contribution. Now, let us bring all of this together into something actionable, because information, no matter how valuable, is only as useful as the degree to which it is applied. The goal is not to implement everything we have discussed overnight. The goal is to begin, to choose one or two things that resonate most deeply with where you are right now, and to start there with genuine consistency. If you are physically depleted, prioritize sleep above everything else. Begin with 1 week of protecting your sleep with the same seriousness you give your most important appointments. Choose a consistent sleep time. Create a wind-down routine. Remove screens from the bedroom. See what 7 to 9 uncompromised hours of sleep actually feels like. For many people who are used to surviving on 6 or fewer hours, this alone produces a transformation so significant it is almost disorienting. If you are mentally depleted, begin with breath and silence. Commit to 5 minutes each morning before you look at your phone of simply sitting quietly and breathing slowly. 5 minutes. Not a meditation retreat, not a complete lifestyle overhaul, just 5 minutes of deliberate quiet before the demands of the day begin. Over time, this single practice shifts your relationship with your own mind in ways that are difficult to fully describe until you experience them firsthand. If you are emotionally depleted, begin with connection and expression. Reach out to one person this week with genuine openness. Not a surface-level exchange, but a real conversation. And write. Every evening, take 10 minutes to write without editing, without performing, without any audience in mind. Write what is true. Write what you feel. Write what you are carrying, and then close the journal and let it hold those things for you overnight so that you do not have to. The most important thing is to treat these practices not as indulgences to be earned after you have finished everything else, but as the foundation from which everything else becomes possible. Recovery is not the reward at the end of effort. Recovery is what makes sustained effort possible. It is not the opposite of productivity. It is the source of it. I want to leave you with this. Somewhere inside of you, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the noise, beneath the relentless forward momentum of a life that demands so much. There is a quieter self, a self that knows what it needs, a self that is not defined by how much it produces or how available it is to others. A self that is worthy of rest, worthy of care, worthy of the same tender attention you might give to a person you love who was suffering. Recharging yourself is not an act of retreat from the world. It is an act of return. A return to yourself, to your own rhythms, to the deep well of vitality that exists within you when you stop drawing from it faster than you refill it. The world will always have more demands. There will always be more to do, more to give, more to be. The question is whether you will tend the source from which all of that giving flows. You deserve to feel rested. You deserve to feel clear. You deserve to feel present in your own life, embodied in your own skin, connected to your own purpose. And none of that requires perfection. It requires intention. It requires small, consistent acts of care directed inward. It requires the courage, and yes, I believe it does take courage in this world, to treat your own well-being as genuinely important. Take a breath. Not because you need to perform it for anyone, but because it is yours. Because this moment, right now, is an opportunity to begin, to recharge, to return, and from that place of renewed wholeness, to show up more fully for yourself, for the people you love, and for the work that only you can do in this world. Thank you for giving this time to yourself today.